Hello and welcome to another unfiltered episode of Full Throttle here on Unprecedented TV. And this is where we go flat out on issues that affect everyday life in Britain. I'm Paul Naylor, I'm the Communications Director for the Alliance of British Drivers. And today we're pulling the curtain back on the sinister world of government psyops and behavioural manipulation.
And I'm Brian Gregory, Policy Director of the Alliance of British Drivers. Today we're very pleased and privileged to be joined by Dr Gary Sidley, retired NHS consultant, clinical psychologist, co-founder of the Smile Not Sure campaign and one of the UK's sharpest critics of state-sponsored nudging and psychological warfare. Gary blew the whistle on the unethical use of fear during COVID and now warns the same dark arts are being deployed across society, motorists very much included. So buckle up, this is Full Throttle. Gary, welcome and thanks very much for joining us.
No, thanks for the invite. It's good to be here, fellas.
Okay,
Good to see you.
It's a pleasure. For viewers who haven't come across your work yet, there it is. You spent 33 years in the NHS, saw firsthand how behavioural science was weaponised during the pandemic and have been fearless ever since. Today we want the full picture. What exactly are nudging and psyops? How far have they spread beyond COVID? And where do motorists fit into this bigger control agenda?
So, Gary, you were one of the earliest voices calling out the Behavioural Insights team. How did gentle nudging turn into outright psychological manipulation of the British public?
Right. Well, maybe it always was psychological manipulation, just that we didn't know about it.
Yeah.
Nudging. There's lots of different forms of psychological manipulation, which you'll be aware of. You know, there's some crass forms like censorship and smearing dissenting voices, cancelling people who were talking out against the dominant narrative. There's all those, and then there's the slightly more subtle, more psychologically oriented manipulation, which would be things like nudging. Now, these things have always been with us over the centuries. They're not new, but I think the difference now is that the intensity of them and how they're pretty much ubiquitous. They're in every nook and cranny of our lives.
Mm.
You mentioned the Behavioural Insight team. They're a key player, the nudge unit, as we call them. They're formed in 2010 as a 6-person unit. It's in the Cabinet Office with David Cameron back in the day. But I've expanded plus since then, and now a private company, but operating in many countries across the world, obviously including the UK, employing many people. So it's the intensity, I think, that's changed, and they use nudges. They use nudge. That's what they specialise in. Now, nudge is any kind of behavioural or psychological intervention that persuades people. But the thing about nudging that's quite distinctive is that a lot of it tends to happen below the level of consciousness of people who are being targeted.
Yeah. So what I don't understand about this, Gary, is subliminal advertising is illegal. It was illegal a long time ago, where they flashed up messages very quickly, and those messages were picked up by your brain, and it had an influence on people, and that was outlawed. Why is nudging and behavioural psyops not unlawful? Because you're forcing people, or you are pushing people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do by subconscious means.
Well, yes, I agree, Brian, and that's a question that I've asked a number of times to various authorities, including the British Psychological Society, who were like the governing body of psychological activity in the UK. And
that at the time was run by it was run by Susan Mitchie, who's a well-known Marxo-fascist who's now joined the World Economic Forum, I think.
She is. She's got a lucrative job with the WHO, in I think it's called TAG. I think they call themselves. They're really into acronyms of behavioural scientists. They love them. But these things have been around. A more sophisticated definition of nudge comes from the Mindspace document from 2000.
Yes.
And I'll just read a little bit of that out, because according to them, what nudging is, there are behavioural strategies that achieve, and I quote, low cost, low pain ways of nudging citizens into new ways of acting by going with the grain of how we think and act, unquote. Now, the key there is going with the grain. What's happening there is human beings are just riddled with biases, perceptual biases. That's being human. We don't. None of us see the world in a 100% impartial way. We're riddled with biases, and what happens is that nudges exploit those biases to actually increase the likelihood that we behave in a way that fits their goals. So that's really what nudging is about. And since 2010, things have expanded, and I think the difference now, like I said, is the intensity and just the breadth of it, really. And obviously with social media, that amplifies things, many times.
Yeah.
You were mentioning before, Brian, when we chatted earlier about freedom of information requests about behavioural scientists and nudges, because they are everywhere.
Yes.
In the COVID event, we had them in the SAGE groups, the SPIBs, the specialist psychological subgroup of SAGE. That was like a transient group that disbanded after the COVID event. But also, there's other sources as well. There's a government communication service which across the UK apparently employs over 7,000 professional communicators, many of whom will be behavioural scientists.
Yeah.
The last I heard from Freedom of Information requests, Revenue and Customs had 54 behavioural scientists employed in-house. Right. UK Health Security Agency, 24. Department of Transport, last time we asked, 20,022, I think it was. They have 6 in the Department of Transport. Work and Pensions, 16. I asked the Department of Energy and Security last year, and they refused to tell me because it would have taken them too long to count them all up, apparently.
Really?
So is that what you do? They're everywhere. So every walk of our life now is being nudged, whether it's filling in your tax form, whether it's using public transport, whether it's deciding whether or not to drive in your car, which is obviously of interest to you guys particularly. It's all being manipulated, because it's all based on this premise, this technocratic experts know best. They know what's best for us all, so they're going to control what we do. They're going to try to anyway.
So, I mean, if you roll this back, if we had these units in history, then Galileo and Copernicus would have been cancelled, and we'd still believe that the sun revolves around the Earth rather than the other way around. Because in fact, what they're saying is, we know best. We know what the truth is. We know what the science is. So shut up and put up with it.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that really gets in my craw, I've got a few things getting in my craw, but this one particularly is that we're paying for these guys to manipulate us. We're talking about in-house nudges in the various departments. We're paying for them. We're talking about people working for the nudge unit, the behavioural insight. Private company, they're contracted in with big bucks, multi-million pounds.
And again,
for all manipulation.
From what you're saying, it's like it stands alongside government, but not totally under its control. It's like an NGO now, a sort of private. You said private company.
Private company.
These people are not properly under control, and the other thing is that who's to say that the goals that they choose are the ones that the rest of the population and the electorate actually want?
Exactly. Yeah. There's no. How do they know best? What? No.
Yeah,
And this
exactly.
is one of the main problems with the behavioural insight team as well. They just blindly assume that the goals of the dominant narrative, whether that's around health, climate, energy, net zero, they assume
Yeah.
that those are all worthwhile goals, and therefore they don't give a second thought, it appears, to reflecting on whether they're actually channeling us down ways that are counterproductive in the
Yeah.
longer term.
And there's no oversight body. The same as with speed camera partnerships and all these sort of things, that they're actually out with the political process and make decisions that are in their own interests, but not necessarily the interests of the people who are affected by their actions.
Absolutely,
And that's
absolutely,
just
yeah.
completely wrong. Everybody should have oversight at some point. Everybody.
Yes, quite.
So
Yeah.
going back to 2020, when COVID was ever present and we were going into lockdown, what were your thoughts at the time? Do you think that things were handled correctly, or do you think that there should have been a different way of doing things? Because obviously we all became lemmings, this is what we're going to do, and people just didn't really fight back enough against what people were being told to do.
Well, back in the day, if it went back to 2019, Paul,
Yeah.
I was naive, because a lot of these horrendous things and manipulative things and sometimes egregious things have been going on for a very, very long time. But I was kind of oblivious, like most people at that time, 2019. I worked hard, got my head down, like we all do, trying to do what's best for our family. We're busy, don't really think about it.
Yeah.
But thankfully, although I suppose it's a double-edged sword when you can see it, isn't it? Thankfully, early doors in 2020, even before the first lockdown, I actually thought this isn't right. This is not good. Yeah. The direction of travel is pretty bad here. And I started, starting to dig and start to do research. So even around the time of the first lockdown, I was getting absolutely battered on social media for actually, because I did a blog at the time about, does it really need to be like this? Why are we locking down? Why, why are we adopting these policies that have never been in any pandemic plan ever? What's going on?
And as a scientist, I couldn't understand it, because when you actually looked at the size of the virus, which is like 140 nanometers, it was very, very small. And you look at the pores in the masks, and I worked out you could get about 12 million virus particles through one of the pores. So it was a bit like a net that was supposed to, the net the size of a tennis court to catch tennis balls. Exactly. It's never going to do anything.
And don't get me started on masks, Brad. Don't get me started on masks. Otherwise,
the other thing was, you can't develop an effective vaccine in less than 10 years, not to give it all the clinical trials. And suddenly the damn thing appeared, and within 12 months there was a vaccine, and we were being told the vaccine would stop transmission, and would stop the virus altogether. And it transpired, obviously, it didn't do either of those things. In fact, if anything, the more you've been vaccinated, the more prone you are to being infected by other variants of COVID and everything else. So we were being fed a complete load of rubbish, and it wasn't any kind of science at all, not proper science. It was a narrative, but it wasn't scientifically based. So I became very, very suspicious and very, very anti then, and have been ever since.
And the thing was, for me, I think, is that one side realised, which was early doors, that they were telling grotesque lies to us about this so-called novel virus. And once you start to dig down into the research and do a bit more reading about it, it was clear that they were just telling untruths on a pretty consistent basis. And then once your eyes have been opened like that, you start then to ask, well, if they're lying about this in the health sphere,
what else
are they doing in other spheres?
Yeah.
So that, of course, opens up the climate nonsense, all the catastrophic, green stuff, and we're all heading towards climate Armageddon. And you get into that, and you start to query some of the narratives around these forever wars. and in a way, that's what I said about a double-edged sword. In a way, it's good to realise these things, but in another way, it's not so good because it can
because it opens your eyes to all the other areas that were being manipulated.
Exactly. Yeah, and the green agenda, of course, which is probably what you guys are particularly interested in with regards to nudging. I mean, we start to look at some of the things that are being used around the green agenda generally, and net zero nonsense generally, but also more specifically around car use. There are all these same techniques that were used in the COVID event are being used for that. In fact, I was just thinking before, just getting in my head like a list of the various nudges used around travel and around the green agenda, but with a specific focus on car use.
Yes.
I'll perhaps just quickly go through them, can I, guys?
Yes, please.
Please do. Yeah.
This list was I came up with 7 jumped out at me. Some of them were more obvious than others, and not that subtle.
Yeah.
Obviously, one is incentives and losses. So this is where you subsidise alternatives to car use. So public transport, and you punish the car user. Now I don't need to tell you this, you two, because you know this by the back of your hand. But increase parking fees, make it difficult, for car users, blah blah blah. The second nudge. This is no particular order, but the second one is what they call a salience nudge, which is obviously we tend to be more affected by what jumps out at us, what we notice.
Yes.
Now, around this, one of the things that they have been doing is around making electric vehicles more visible. I don't know whether you're aware, you may be, there was a collaborative document done by Sky TV and the Nudge Unit back in 2021 called Decarbonising How to Decarbonise Our Lives, or some words to that effect. And what they explicitly stated they were going to do is they were going from that point onwards, every documentary, every drama, every news bulletin, etc., advertisement, they were going to try and build in little indicators, little nudges to get us, to do the right thing. And one of the things that they talk specifically about there is about in the background of programs and dramas and whatever, maybe having an electric car.
Well, if you watch Shetland, the main character uses an electric car, but she's the only person on Shetland that does. Exactly where the charges are, I haven't the faintest idea. But if you imagine somewhere like Shetland driving around and there are not going to be electric charges every 10 miles or 10 feet down the road, they're going to be a long way apart from each other. And that was an example that immediately I thought, this is totally unrealistic.
Yeah. Then you have things like default nudges, which, as the name suggests, it's like what if you don't do anything, what do you finish up with? So you have defaults with things like companies using electric cars as their fleet instead of alternative ones. But then you get into the more psychologically and somewhat more subtle, although sometimes not that subtle, nudges. And I mentioned 4 of those because these are the ones that really, I think, are ethically highly dubious. One's is affect. A scared population tends to be a compliant one. So with the green agenda, this amount of Armageddon stuff that we had around there. What was the guy from the United Nations? What's he called? Guterres or something like that?
Yeah, I call him the clown prince of climate charlatans.
Well, exactly. Telling us about we're all on the eve of destruction and all that. And
the oceans are boiling. Not the last time I looked into it.
No, not last time I took a dip either. Exactly. Kids are being brainwashed at school. The climate crisis is the biggest existential threat facing the world.
Yeah.
You know, and that's despite the fact that around 1 in 6 of them are already suffering anxiety around their future and the world's future. You know, and we're filling their heads with this crap. Excuse the language. You know, it's just, not on. So this affect and all that stuff, modelling. Don't get me started about modelling. You know, with these catastrophic.
The COVID example showed a prime example of when modelling goes mad. I mean, idiot Ferguson. I mean, you know, it's a measure now. For me, I use anything that's about between 2.5 and 5 times out of, you know, register with reality. That's a Ferguson. So 2 or 3 Fergusons out, and you know, you're in a different universe.
Absolutely, got a history, hasn't he? Got a history, you know. And,
absolutely, he does.
You know, even had Hallett at the COVID inquiry citing modelling about these lockdowns would have saved 23,000 lives if we'd have got down a week earlier. Absolute nonsense, as you'll know. You know, with modelling, it all depends on what you input.
The conflation it was the conflation together of dying with COVID and dying of. Yeah. Because if you look at the ofs, it was only about 25,000 or something, I think. But withs was a much bigger number. But it wasn't COVID that was killed them. They're already dying with something else.
Yeah.
You know? And that was. I felt that was completely below the belt and propaganda.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah. So you got fear. You got the ego nudge as well, which is an interesting one. I think this is around shaming people into compliance. Mm-hmm. So. All human beings like to see themselves as a decent person, you know, a good, virtuous human being. So what they do is, of course, they equate following what they want us to do with being a self-righteous, virtuous person. So, you know, think about the catastrophic impact on your children and your grandkids. You know, do you want to be responsible for that? You know, their welfare. So you have the affect nudge, you got the ego nudge, you have norms. This is one that's used very widely with the green agenda. This is where we tend to find comfort from being or believing we're in the center of the herd. You know, sometimes it can be quite uncomfortable to feel that you're in a minority.
I scored very badly at that. I did something that's called McQuaig personality thing. And I was one of these people that if I believed something, and I was out there, I'd stay there. I wasn't moving to join the pack. So I think that probably caused me problems within the company I was working for, because I basically said, you know, if you want me to do that and I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it.
You're one of the non-compliers then who doesn't tend to follow the order. There's pressure, and I think anybody, you know, I like to think I'm not a compliant person in many ways, but you know, normative pressure. I remember the time early doors when I was, you know, in a butcher's shop queue actually at Christmas, where everybody's masked up. Of course, you know, that's a very uncomfortable place to be. You know, it can be really uncomfortable. That's normative pressure. Somebody actually did shout up. Actually, I've forgotten your mask.
I got into an argument like that in a supermarket queue as well. And
I've got very good reasons not to.
I said, I can tell you as an university graduate, this science is crap. It's not doing you any good. And of course, he got aggressive with me then. Because he was a believer.
Yes.
But anyway,
normative pressure. That's what I emphasise normative pressure, because they use this big time. There's a classic example. I did an article on this about, I think I call it the manipulation nudge, the 3-stage manipulation nudge around normative pressure. It's quite simple, really, but I think quite effective as well from their point of view. And that is what they do is they scare us all and shame us all into thinking there's a tremendous
and of course
Armageddon that's coming over the horizon.
And close down any legitimate criticism as well.
Absolutely. And then the second stage is they do their surveys, then these government surveys, and they ask very bland, generalized questions like, how concerned are you about climate change? Now, of course, after being bombarded through school and media with all these catastrophic messages, what did they get?
Yeah.
85% of people, well, thereabouts, say they have some concern about it. They never ask questions like, you know, of exaggeration that's going on from government departments.
And they never ask questions about, well, you know, if you have to sacrifice 16% of your income to prevent climate change, are you prepared to do it? And the answer is
yeah. And then the third step, what they do then is they put that into a message or in an article, and you get things like, in fact, this is one out of the BIT document and the Sky collaboration I mentioned. Tackling, and I quote, tackling climate change is backed by huge public support. The government's own data reveal high public concern for climate change, in brackets 84%. So you see what I mean? So that's scare us. Ask a bland question, and then share that information. And the bit we're using pre-formed tweets for that. So you don't have to write your tweet. They just you know, when you read the article, you can click on this tweet, and that would go out to all your friends and associates, and using normative pressure to nudge them into complying with the climate stuff. And the final one, and I'll shut up about it. It's messenger nudge. And this is about trusted sources of information. And again, this was used extensively through the COVID event with the so-called experts and people with regional accents, because we're more likely to take note of somebody like us. No ethnic groups, no Lenny Henry telling us all to get vaxxed, you know, that kind of thing. That's using the messaging nudge, and that's used quite extensively as well, you know, in the climate arena. Obviously, the obvious example is David Attenborough, preaching his catastrophic stuff. He's highly respected. But even more sinister than that is, I don't know whether you're aware that recently they have tried to bring on board health professionals, doctors, GPs, talking about them being trusted sources of information, and they want them when we go for if we manage to get an appointment, that is, of course, once we get in for a consultation, they want them to weave messages about the climate and about the negative impact of climate on our health.
And stopping using antibiotics and all these other things.
Well, stop killing us with your iatrogenic stuff, but you couldn't make it up, really. And
so the whole COVID, the whole way that the country handled COVID seems to be a dry run for how they're going to do it for the green agenda.
And locking us down because of the climate crisis that isn't actually happening.
I mean, my greatest fear in all this is that we do go down that route, where so many of the massive countries on this planet are not going to go down that route, and the only people that are going to benefit from that is them. You know, it's crazy.
The Chinese have an effective social control system, and we are going down the same route. But India, Russia, I don't think. They have their own sort of autocratic regimes in way. I mean, even the Indians have got ID card system that apparently is a disaster. But they are going to keep increasing the living standards of their population, because that's the best way to try and keep them under a level of control. If their living standards are going up, if they start going the other way, then it gets more difficult. And I think we're at a bit of a nexus now, because the policies that this government's been adopting, with all the nudge and all the rest of it, are clearly not improving the state of the economy. In fact, they're crashing it at a significant rate of knots. And even with all the behavioural insight stuff and all the nudges, more and more people are realising that this is a completely wrong direction to go, and so they're opposing it more and more stiffly as time goes on.
I think you're right, Brian. Yeah, I think that is a positive. I said earlier, I sometimes get a little bit depressed about the way the world's going, but there are grounds for optimism, and that is one of them. More and more people are becoming aware of what's going on. Maybe particularly around the green agenda. I think that might be where people are waking up first. I think
absolutely, and then tracing it backwards from there. I mean, even apparently Sweden now, young people. Environmental concerns are about 20th in the list of important things, and the biggest, well, apart from the same problems with integration or non-integration of incoming immigrants, the other things are all economic. You know, am I going to get a job? Can I buy a house? Stuff like that, and that pushes all the climate stuff to the bottom of the pile, as it should, because you know what we've done for centuries now is we've adapted to whatever the climate throws at us, and that's what we should continue to do. Any idea that we can control the climate is for the birds. It's just stupid.
It is. It's absolute nonsense, isn't it? And I think the thing that weighs heavy on me though is, like I said, I was naive back in 2019, and it's only since early 2020 that I've kind of woken up and started to realise what's going on.
Yeah.
And that can be quite, it's really difficult in many ways. And I think a lot of people find it difficult, not least because Western institutions that most of us anyway, once trusted, just cannot be trusted. They're the major sources of disinformation. And I do recognise increasingly this technocratic kind of world takeover. It sounds a bit conspiratorial, this, but I don't think it is once you start looking at it. If you actually look at the technocratic agenda, you know, the rule by experts agenda with alongside it things like, you know, eugenics movement and things like that. These things have been brewing for a long time.
Yeah. And it's when you see
2020, they accelerated rapidly, I think.
And you see them trickling in, you know, abortion at what is it, up to the point of birth almost now, you know, and assisted dying and all this stuff, all linked to this sort of eugenics and genetic population control, all of the things that the autocrats and technocrats want. And of course, big companies want it because big pharma is a huge earner. And if you can keep everybody ill and taking drugs, the pharma companies make a huge amount of money. And you get control as well. So you begin to become really cynical about everything government and big companies and the civil service do. And that's my default position now is, unless they can prove without a shadow of a doubt that it's beneficial, I assume that it's adverse and we should resist it. That's my default.
Well, that's right, and it's like floating in a sea of misinformation, isn't it, from every source really, and it's really difficult to know, particularly with things like you know, the various technological things they can do these days with AI and you know, you see photographs and footage and you think, oh, that's not real. You know, that's been contrived, and it really can be quite an uncomfortable place to be. But you know, to keep on a more positive note, I do think, like you said, that people are becoming more aware, and I think it's about what would be really important is for people to become more and more aware of the broader picture, not just in one particular area.
No,
to start to wake up to climate stuff and health stuff, but that these technocrats, these, you know, whatever you want to call them, deep state, global elites, political elite, whatever. They're going to use whatever they can to control us. Now, whether that's health emergencies, in inverted commas, whether it's climate, whether it's pollution, whether it's you know, forever wars, etc., they will use it as a way of trying to gain control over the minutiae of our day-to-day lives.
Well, the ID cards are a prime example of this, that they're pushing strongly now. Again, it's a control measure. It's got nothing to do with preventing illegal immigration or illegal working or any of that. It's purely a control measure, so that they can get more control over all of us and also reduce our accessibility to sources of alternative information, which they call dis or misinformation. For me, the biggest source of dis and misinformation is the government. Yeah,
that is right. That is right.
I mean, we've got a prime minister who is a globalist, so he doesn't really care as much about his country as you would expect a prime minister to do.
No.
And we've got one who keeps pushing elections back time and time again. So what does that tell you? You know, this is somebody who is. It's almost like he would love to turn it into an empire so that he could reign over it forever and a day. So it's the scariest time in politics that I can recall, anyway.
Yeah, me too. And he's already said, hasn't he, our Prime Minister, that he prefers to be in Davos than he does in the Houses of Parliament
in Westminster.
So that says a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, it certainly does. Yeah, about where. Well, and of course the problem is his legal background, and he just whatever the law is, and especially if it's international law, it trumps everything else, even sanity and fairness and ethics. You know. And things like the Chagos Islands. I mean, apparently one of his big mates actually did the legal work for Mauritius to acquire the Chagos Islands. Sorry, for us to pay Mauritius to take the Chagos Islands from us, and then to lease back Diego Garcia or whatever it's called.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, but I can well believe it.
And don't even start on Tony Blair's family being highly connected to the ID cards.
But the thing about these psychological manipulations, or these nudges, is well, they're just so grossly unethical. Something what you alluded to earlier. I think, what gives the government the right to strategically inflict emotional pain and discomfort on its populations as a way of getting them to do what they want them to do? That's so authoritarian, and so
it is.
What we'd say back in the day, China-like, isn't it? In a way.
Yeah.
If I were in power, the first thing I would do, I would give all of these behavioural psychologists their P45s and send them off to the labour exchange if they still exist. And I would repeal all that, the legislation that enables it, and make it illegal to use behavioural psychology on the electorate. And the other thing, I would also charge all of these politicians who are involved in COVID and all this crap with gross abuse of human rights using Nuremberg Code legislation, and I would bring back the death penalty to discourage anybody from ever trying to do it again. Because a few examples, and that people think about that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't hesitate. I must be honest. Sometimes you have to crack
sitting on the fence, Brian.
Sometimes you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelette.
Oh dear. I mean, you touched on it before, Gary, about schooling from sort of like primary school up to and including, and probably more dangerously, university. People are no longer being taught how to think, but what to think. And that's the greatest danger that we've got out there at the moment.
Yes, absolutely,
People aren't being able to have that sort of ability to think for themselves.
It's a bit like the government are using Orwell's 1984 as a manual, an instruction manual.
Very much so,
the brainwashing and the
and you're sent to prison for wrong speak.
Wrong speak.
I mean, one of the most weirdest things these days is platforms such as Facebook, where you can be sat there talking to your partner about something. You start scrolling on Facebook, and all of a sudden you get 3 or 4 different articles on what you've just been talking about. You go, hang on, what's this one? And the fact that everybody that's on these sorts of I call them anti-social media, but social media, is that when you're looking at these things, they give you that blinkered view of life. They give you that, they only give you what they think you want to see. So how are you ever going to broaden your knowledge of what's out there? It's very, very strange time.
It's a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? It's a bit like, I do share that kind of sense, Paul, as well. All the social media channels are all highly censored. People claim things like Twitter isn't censored. It is. It's just not quite as blatant as some of the others, and algorithms just channel your kind of your content to people who probably already believe it anyway, which is a major problem. I think this one point I would, as we get near the end, I think problem, or the issue I'd like to just raise is about the question of how do we get out of this? How do we fight back?
Mm.
And for me, the key there is to try and encourage people to show visible dissent and non-compliance.
Yes.
Nothing kind of greatly complicated about that.
Because if enough people don't comply, then they can't control.
Oh, far more of us than them, And but when I say that, a lot of time, sometimes people come back at me and go, "Oh, Gary, I've tried. There's no reaching some people," and that's true. I think I'd save my breath for the moment, at least, with people who've been full on COVID narrative or full on climate change, whose career depends on it.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Was it Upton who said once, the American, you can't make a man understand something if his living depends upon him not understanding it.
Yeah.
It's a great way, isn't it? They've got so much industry built up around this, so you waste your breath with that. But I think there is a silent middle. I'm always banging on about this. There's the majority in the middle who have some ambivalence about what's going on. They realise things aren't right.
Yes,
but we haven't as yet felt able, for whatever reason, and it's easy for retired kids like me to shout out, because I'm not working in the NHS anymore. But everybody, people need to speak up, and it's that group in the middle, the ambivalent group, the silent middle, that need to be visible. It's no good hiding behind an anonymous icon on social media.
No.
They need to put the name to it and take every opportunity. Whether it's in the pub or in the, when you get your haircut in the shop, when the opportunity arises, without preaching, respond. I was having my haircut a few weeks back. I was having my haircut, and the guy, and the lass said, "Oh, my partner's real kind of oddball, and then in many ways, not a non-conformist." She says, It didn't even get the jab. And I said, "Oh, well, I didn't either."
Yeah.
And the room's packed. Everybody could hear this conversation going on. You could almost see, God was hear the cogwheels going around with people just some were probably thinking
these non-conformists are not as unusual as some people think they are.
Yeah. There's been a real there's been a real suppression of opinion, hasn't there? So
that's the whole idea, isn't it?
Catch-22 for me on social media. Sorry, what I was going to try to say before is, in a way, social media with the technocrats is a real powerful instrument that they can brainwash us plus compared to what they could have done a couple of decades ago.
Yes. Yeah.
But also, it's a tool that potentially gives us a bit more of a potential to get our message out there as well, even though it's censored and restricted to various degrees. So I've got to stop. Don't want to leave it.
Because I think much more. I mean, about free speech. I think he's more open-minded, and that's what we need. We need people to be prepared to think outside the box that they're being shoveled into, and look at alternatives. Because everything's, it's being pre-fed, pre-packaged, and that's all you need to know. Well, actually, no, it isn't. Most topics are much wider than that, and the received wisdom is often not right.
I think that's right, Brian. I think people need to, people will only move, usually anyway, kind of one cog at a time.
Yes.
Think of people on a spectrum, from the full-on dominant narrative to the full-on skeptics that the other call. It's if you try and change the viewpoint of somebody who's too far away from what you're saying, it will not register. It will get distorted. It'll get dismissed. It'll get ground down to mean something else. So it might not even be heard. They might not even attempt it.
And it challenges, because of course they have the self-image, and if you hit them with something that completely undermines their self-image, then they won't respond at all well to that. So
exactly. They just think, in fact, they'll get deeper into what they believe as a defense mechanism. They'll become much more firmly pro narrative. What we've got to do is try and pitch things just slightly along from where they currently are,
Yes.
Yeah.
And, and it's not always easy to gauge. You've got to kind of just gauge where you're at with people at times, and then and just try and drip feed information, which they get curious. Once they get curious, you're on a winner, because they start then to process.
Because when they start looking at things, I mean, it's the same with all of the sort of enlightened skeptics like Schellenberger, Patrick Moore, Bjorn Lomborg, people like that. In terms of climate, these guys wanted to prove that there was a problem with climate change, and the more they dig into it, the more they found there isn't actually a problem. That it's not an existential threat, which is what Bill Gates has just admitted within the last couple of weeks. And so if you can get people curious and checking facts instead of relying on fact checkers, then they'll find things out for themselves and find that things are actually much better than the picture that's being painted by our friend Clown Prince Gutierrez. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and I think those kind of conversations, I think everybody can have them. They're not preaching. Obviously, people just turn off if you start preaching, particularly if they're too far away from where you're at the time. But opportunities do pop up regularly in just general life. Oh no, I don't agree with that, or I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to wear that mask. I'm not wearing a mask. Just to share with friends, relatives. And on a positive note, my sense is that there are more and more people now who are showing dissent. There are showing people of dissent, saying, "No, this is not right. This is crap. This is rubbish. I'm not going to do that again."
Which bodes better for the future, because the more they try and clamp down, the more people are going to dissent, and there comes a point where it becomes obvious that that's not sustainable, and they will have to back off or find themselves in a sea of civil disorder.
Yes, I think they either back off or they go too fast from their perspective. So I think they may have done through COVID. COVID woke a lot of people up. So I think in that respect, it went too fast from their, given their aims, because I think more people thought this is not right. This is rubbish. Started like me questioning all the other institutions that are pumping out misinformation to us.
Of course, one of the craziest things that you'd see during COVID would be somebody driving along in their car, one person, just the driver in the car with a mask on. What's that all about?
I know, and it's hard. It's difficult at times not to ridicule, isn't it? But
it really is.
but then again, ridiculing people doesn't really get them to change their mind. That's the problem.
No, it doesn't. Actually, probably hardens their views. You've got to get them. It's in that situation, as you say, it's a lot of little nudges over a period of time that will convert them. But if you hit them straight on and ridicule, then that's probably counterproductive.
Yeah.
Anyway, where are we with our question list?
Don't want to start now.
Most of them. I mean, I think we've already answered one of the questions Paul was going to ask, and said, when they target car use, 20-mile-an-hour zones, or meat eating, is that still nudging, or is it full on psyops? Well, I think it's a combination of a number of techniques at once.
I think psyops is a broad term, isn't it? Really, it incorporates a lot of things, and I think they do blend into one, don't they? I think it's just about how blatant or how much untruth there is to what they're actually pushing.
What would be the general definition of psyops?
I'm not quite sure, to be honest, but it's not a phrase I tend to use that often. I think some kind of deliberate, strategic misinformation by the establishment, which can take many forms, can't it?
I think inflexibility is the biggest thing about it, because it's stated as fact. You're not allowed to question it, and if you question it, you get shut down or ridiculed. Then that probably means that what they're saying is not actually true, and they want to silence you because you're asking questions that would open up people's minds and intellects to alternative ideas.
Yes, and you can see how the Overton window, I think it's called, isn't it? It's just shift. Which again is a positive in a way, because going back to 2021, if you expressed any skepticism about the effectiveness of mass lockdowns and the like, you'd get absolutely crucified. Now you seem to get away with it to a greater extent. More and more people coming on board, at least acknowledging various degrees of view that it wasn't the best thing to do. So things are changing. Things are changing, which is a positive.
What do you think will happen about this latest wave of flu/COVID that's been in the news? Do you think we're going to see a lot of masks being worn again?
Well, I haven't noticed many yet.
Not yet.
No. And I hope, because I'm pretty confident that the significantly greater number of people now are more sceptical.
Yes.
Whether that's sufficient, whether we reach like a critical mass of dissenters to tip the balance is not, it's a different question. So I don't know. They kind of test us out with these things, don't they? I think somebody's clearly been pushing masks and viruses again for a few weeks now. It's always popping up on my social media, on Facebook. Every third kind of thing I come across seems to be about get back to wearing mask or go and get your jab, and that might be because I was thinking this the other day. Actually, that might be because what I've been doing for the last few weeks, probably months, is if I ever see things like that, I just put a laughing emoji on the bottom, or I respond with a clown world kind of thing, a clown and a little thing on it. But then I realised that the algorithms will probably be thinking I'm interested in this, so they keep sending me more of the darn stuff. So I'm getting bombarded with it. I was a colleague, a skeptic colleague, the day. Do you see loads of these things? I went, no, not that many. So
a bit counterproductive, that was.
I may have to change
it now because of your responses.
Brilliant.
Okay, and the final question we were going to ask, so we might as well use this because I think we've covered most, is if you walked into Whitehall tomorrow and were handed the keys to the nudge unit, what would you do on day one?
I close it down, I think. I'm probably not the most impartial person to ask about the nudge unit, because I've been battling it for 5 years now. And it's just like I said, what really gets me, I do actually believe a lot of the people in there do think they're actually doing good. I don't think they're all egregious.
Just like the people in Nazi Germany thought they were doing good.
To some extent, they think they're doing good, like the people in bubbles do, don't they? These things aren't going to go away. I think we have to be clear about that. These things are always going to be used to some extent, but I think there is something distinctive.
They need to be subject to regulation by a higher body with a higher standard of ethics.
But more to the point, Brian, that it's our government that's doing this. It's how we're paying through our taxes for people to manipulate us. I can buy it with advertisers. I can, excuse the pun. I can take it with advertisers that they're always going to use that. They're going to want me to buy their product. Of course they are. So they're going to use.
Because they're trying to sell you a product.
Government. Our servants, supposed to be people we pay their wages for, are manipulating us, and I just think that's completely.
I take very badly to that as well. Absolutely, and I think that's the thing we've got to stop, and there's got to be a rollback of this. And at some point, a political party has to take control of this and put in legislation in place for controlling bodies to control supposedly ethics units to actually be ethical.
Yes. Yeah, we need to go back to, I suppose, I'm not a religious person, but back in the day, religion was one of the positives, a lot of negatives, but one of the positives of religion is it gives us some values that weren't utilitarian values, it weren't the greater good values, it was about predominantly around the individual, what is right and what is wrong. We've got to get back to that, and I think we've got to come up with some explicit values, ethical values that was saying that this country is going to adopt, and we're going to use these to adjudicate on various policy decisions, not keep falling back like we've done throughout the COVID event on, the greater good, or you're being selfish, got to think of others. No, if you lose the individual rights, the personal freedoms of the one person, what my basic human rights are, then you've lost everything. We need to get back to that kind of focus. But we do seem a long way away from that, sadly, at the moment.
Yeah.
But certainly it's interesting that the Americans are sufficiently concerned about the disappearance of our civil rights. They're actually trying to intervene to change the course. And of course, the attempts to censor American companies that are being made by Ofgem. Is it Ofgem? The broadcaster using all these bits of legislation. The Americans
Ofcom.
Sorry, that's it. A meeting with stiff resistance from the Americans, and they passed something called the Granite Act, which basically entitles companies in America who are threatened with legislation to sue the companies in the American courts and demand huge damages, damages that would actually bankrupt them. And that, I think that will have some impact eventually. The legislation will have to be tempered or dispensed with at some point. And of course, if there's a change of government to some other alternative parties, their attitude is, well, we will junk this legislation anyway. So, the die's not cast yet.
I think with the fact that the government is supposed to serve us,
exactly.
I would love to see some legislation come in that if they drift too far or even slightly away from their manifesto, like this government has, that automatically we would have a general election. Because they got in under false pretenses. So
yes, absolutely.
Fair point.
Fair point. And then see what happens then. They'd have to be a bit smarter about what
that
they
would
do.
certainly concentrate the minds of politicians who think that they can just, play fast and loose with their ethics and morals. If they then suddenly find, well, that's it, you've stepped over the line, snap general election. That would be the ultimate sanction.
Yeah, it's like Gary said. There's a lot of good people in Whitehall, but then there's also a lot of career politicians in there. So
Just finally on the bits that you mentioned on the nudging about if I was to go in there and take charge, perhaps I'm just closing it down. If I couldn't do that, the other thing I would do would be to actually ensure that they really deeply research the goals, because they don't seem to anything that comes from mainstream government.
They just enact
the growth list. They assume that's almost proven. That's the way to go, whether it's climate, health, whatever. And these are supposed to be people that are analytically minded. They're supposed to and some of them really good researchers. Research some of these things quite intensively. But it seems to have this blind spot, or whatever it may be. The goals, as seen through COVID, for instance, or any climate change or whatever, they just accept some things, passively accept them as being valid. And I think the really important change is they started to pay far more attention to that.
Well, I think
the big problem, Gary, is that the cost-benefit analysis has dropped out of favour. They only look at benefits and never look at costs. Because that was clear was what was happening with lockdowns. The costs were colossal and the benefits were very small, but they focused entirely on the benefits and didn't look at the economic carnage that they were causing with that stuff. And as you say, you need these people to be more ethical and to do a full-on ethical cost-benefit analysis on any measure that they're planning to nudge you with.
Not be subliminal. Absolutely.
I think the greatest problem that you've got going forward with all of this is how AI becomes involved with it as well. Because if these people do get lazy on their research and just put a few cues into AI, and then take as read that what AI spits out is correct, well then where's that narrative coming from?
Well, never heard of GIGO, garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. I'm going to say the same. AI is only as good as what goes in, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Okay, I think that's we've had a fairly good exchange of views and a bit of interesting discussion.
Yeah,
Maybe we
enjoyed it.
we should come back in a 12 months time or so and see how things have developed for either better or worse.
Come back in 2 months' time when everybody's wearing masks.
Yeah.
Don't jest about it, Paul.
No. Don't tempt Providence more. Exactly.
It's a wide look. Yeah. No, I enjoyed it.
All right, good. Thanks, Gary. Thanks for coming on. It was a very interesting, excellent discussion. So I'm sure we'll catch up with you later. Maybe not in 2 months wearing masks. Certainly fairly soon.
Anytime, keep in touch.
All right. Yeah, great. Thanks, Gary.
Hello and welcome to another unfiltered episode of Full Throttle here on Unprecedented TV. And this is where we go flat out on issues that affect